You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 18th of October 2024 on Monocle Radio.
It's 2 a.m. in Tokyo, 1900 in Berlin, 1800 here in London and 1300 in Washington, D.C. That's the time on Monocle Radio, brought to you by Chanel Watches. US President Joe Biden makes what is probably his last visit to Europe as leader of the free world. Rome's film festival involves the renaming of a street and the potential legal perils of failing to cheerily greet one's colleagues. I'm Andrew Muller. The Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you from our studios here at Midori House in London. I'm Andrew Muller. It's Friday, so it's our weekly in-house daily, and the first two Monocle staffers to crash out of this week's Office Hungry Hippos tournament were Lily Austin and Chris Cermak. They'll discuss a selection of the day's stuff, plus we'll speak to someone just off Amsterdam's inaugural rave train. Stay tuned, all that and more coming up right here on the Monocle Daily. This is the Monocle Daily. I'm Andrew Muller. I am joined first of all today by Monocle Senior News Editor Chris Cermak and Monocle Studio Manager Lily Austin. Hello to you both.
Hello.
You both have exciting upcoming. This is off to a good start. We have just started the show, and I cannot pronounce.
Happy Friday
I cannot
evening,
pronounce
Andrew.
a
It's
straightforward,
really good to be here.
three-syllable word like upcoming. It's not complicated. It is not complicated. Lily, we will come to yours second because it does cunningly foreshadow an item we shall presently be discussing. Although now that I've said that out loud, I've completely let the light in on the magic. Chris,
Does mine not also foreshadow something we're going to be discussing now?
Yeah, well, sort of, yeah. I mean, we could just switch this off and switch it back on again. Chris, you are going to Washington, D.C. for obvious reasons.
Very obvious reasons, yes. I will be there for around 2 weeks, the week before and the week of the election. So very excited to return to Washington, as I'm sure some listeners at least will know. I was there for the last year and returned to London in January. So yes, it'll be a sort of, and we were there, of course, for the NATO summit back in July.
I was just going to say,
a return to politics.
It's a return to politics, and it's a return to relatively sensible weather, because we were in Washington, D.C. in July, and listeners, if you've never been to Washington, D.C. in July, don't.
It was absolutely sweltering and humid and, yeah, pretty awful. And we had to walk everywhere, if you remember as well, because of all the streets that were closed. So, yes, there was that. It was also just before Joe Biden stepped back, which I always like to think of. It wasn't that long ago. And yet the last time we were there, Andrew, Joe Biden was still the nominee.
That is an incredible thought. That was 4 months ago. It does feel like something that happened sometime in the late 19th century. But yes, we will return to Biden-related topics shortly. Lily, you are going to Rome.
That's true. I am going to Rome, where I believe the climate is very temperate in October. Apparently that's the best month to go, for anyone who's wondering. I don't want to say too much because could potentially spoil my whole little segment that's coming up.
Okay. Well, we will just let the listeners live with the thought that Lily is going to Rome, and they will be perched on the edge of their seats while we discuss
this space.
Perched on the edge of their seats while hanging onto their hats while we discuss this other thing, which is Berlin, which is currently hosting Joe Biden on what will almost certainly be his last European visit as US president. Biden is meeting with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, along with French President Emmanuel Macron and UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer. They knew they would be discussing Ukraine, the president of which, Volodymyr Zelensky, has been pitching what he calls his victory plan to end his country's war with Russia, but the Middle East has been propelled up the agenda by the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. Chris, first of all, listeners will probably be familiar with the term lame duck president, which usually applies to a president who's just lost the election but has to hang around for another couple of months until the transition. Biden isn't going to lose this election, but he isn't going to campaign. So everyone knows he won't be president in a couple of months. How seriously does anyone still take him?
Well, I mean, I think it's also in the same variety as not just that little bit of few months, but anytime you have a two-term president who's at the end of their term, if you will. So that's kind of where Biden is now, as if he were just a one-term president, which he is. I think people are taking it seriously in a couple of ways. One that's maybe most interesting for me, looking at his trip to Germany, is just the welcome he's received, and given the election we're about to face, just the kind of the gratitude that has been thrown at Joe Biden. So I think it's this reminder of what Europe has and a reminder of what it may lose. And you had this sort of in reverse order when, for example, President Steinmeier of Germany gave Joe Biden the Order of Merit, which is the highest honor you can bestow in Germany. And he basically said that, we lost each other for a while, and almost overnight, Europe and the U.S. returned to a semblance of normalcy with Joe Biden becoming president of the United States. What he, of course, didn't say is that could change in the other direction again overnight as well. So I think this visit was sort of this reminder for Europe of what they have, but then also the fact that they need to be ready for what might come next.
All of which is true. That being the case, how much value is there to any of what they are discussing about Ukraine or the Middle East when there is that possibility that 17 days from now, everybody could have to be readjusting significantly?
I think there is actually a fair amount, if only because when you look at both of the conflicts that they will be discussing, whether it is Ukraine or the Middle East, these next few months are actually relatively crucial, right? So there is something you can make an argument for, that what kind of decisions are made now will have some impact regardless of what might be happening next year. Joe Biden, after all, will be president till the end of the year, till January 20th, regardless of what the election has, what the election has to say in 17 days. If you take something like Ukraine, the next few months are critical. They want the support, all the support they can get over the next few months. There's talk of unfreezing Russian assets, for example. So there are some things that can happen between now and the next American president coming into office. And similarly on the Middle East, I think when it comes to talk of a ceasefire in Gaza, all these different discussions that are going on after the death of Yahya Sinwar, this is the moment, right? And it could be Joe Biden, who has already been, as we've gotten this letter from Israel, letter sent to Israel this week, for example, saying 30 days or military aid might be shut off if you don't offer humanitarian access to Gaza. Those kinds of things are happening now. Those kinds of things could continue to happen in November, December, and a bit of January as well. So you can at least see some shift in both of these wars, I think, based on what Biden does before he leaves.
Well, I want to look at each of those wars in turn just quickly, and I want to approach each of them via a quote attached to the discussions going on in Berlin. First to the Middle East, and Biden said, and I quote, "I told the Prime Minister of Israel yesterday, let's also make this a moment, an opportunity to seek a path to peace, a better future in Gaza without Hamas." This is, of course, suggesting that now that Yahya Sinwar has been removed from calculations, maybe there is an opportunity to move things forward. But it's that line, "I told the Prime Minister of Israel." To hear Biden over the last few months in particular, he has been telling the Prime Minister of Israel a lot, but there is absolutely no indication that the Prime Minister of Israel is listening to him.
Well, absolutely. And it's interesting, as you say, that sort of change in turn of phrase, if you will, from Joe Biden. When it came to ceasefires of the past, there have been various points where I'm reminded that Joe Biden said, "I believe a ceasefire is in place," or something to that effect. It wasn't, "I told the Israeli Prime Minister that he should agree a ceasefire." He's now kind of backing away from that, I guess, perhaps realizing that he doesn't have the power that he thought he might, given that there were various points the U.S. thought a ceasefire was in place. So, yes, things have changed. Clearly, the U.S. does not have that much influence over Israeli policy, except for, as we were just discussing, this letter, for example, from the U.S. to Israel, showing that they might perhaps be a little more willing now to not only speak, but also follow up their threats with actions when it comes to Israel if they want to rein in some of their policies. And that would obviously be the key here. It can't just be, "I told the Prime Minister to agree a ceasefire." It has to be, "I told the Prime Minister agree a ceasefire, or we will withhold some of our support."
And let's look quickly at Ukraine as well. A quote from Chancellor Olaf Scholz, which I suspect will not have done anything to improve whatever issues Volodymyr Zelensky may be having with chronic teeth grinding. Scholz said, our position is clear. We are supporting Ukraine as strongly as possible. Good, fine. At the same time, at which one imagines a deep sigh from Kyiv, we are taking care that NATO does not become a party to the war so that this war doesn't culminate in an even bigger catastrophe. This is it not the same eat cake, have cake position that Germany in particular has been trying to take for more than 2.5 years? They don't want Ukraine to lose, but they don't want Russia to lose either.
Well, yes, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I think there's two ways to look at this. One is the charitable way, which would be that I do think Olaf Scholz sometimes says in artful ways the same things that pretty much every other leader is thinking as well. It's not as if the US wants to drag NATO directly into this war with Russia and sort of, boots on the ground in Ukraine, whatever else. This is something that Scholz says. He sort of says it clearly, which makes everyone sort of grind their teeth a little bit, that he doesn't want NATO directly involved. That said, yes, Olaf Scholz has withheld more things than Ukraine would like, than even the US would like. Taurus, for example, is something that's still being discussed in Germany, whether to provide to Ukraine or not. And one aspect I think that's interesting of this that has come out actually also today, there was the release of this report from a Russian state think tank that is making waves a lot in Germany right now, which kind of rates the current leadership in Germany, who they would like to have, who they would not like to have, how they deal with it. And they basically called Olaf Scholz the best of the worst. So there was this view within Russia that we can deal with Olaf Scholz, as it were, because of some of these mixed messages that he sends compared to, for example, Friedrich Merz and the Christian Democrats who might come into power next year if there were elections. Interesting is just a little side bit. They were very worried about the alternative for Germany, surprisingly. They wouldn't be happy with them gaining much. They were very happy with the far left and Sarah Wagenknecht gaining a lot of support in the last election.
Well, let's now pivot seamlessly to something completely different, specifically the Rome Film Festival, and you see now what we were doing earlier, the 19th edition of which is underway right now. Lily, as I understand it, one side effect of this film festival is that all maps of Rome will be rendered completely redundant. People will have to just throw them away and buy a new one.
Yes, it's true, though I haven't been able to get confirmation on exactly what the new street name will be, because it's Francis Ford Coppola. He has a street now named after him in honour of, I guess, his lifetime's work. I can't believe it's in honour of his new film that was screened ahead of the festival, Megalopolis, or Megaflopolis, as we like to call it. I don't know if you've seen the film, Andrew.
I have not seen the film, and based on what I have read of the film, me seeing the film is quite high on the list of things that are extremely unlikely to ever happen.
Well, I've seen it, and I would implore you both, I'd implore all our listeners to see it. It's absolutely stunning. Stunningly bad. It's just a whole new level of incredible. So kind of in honour of...
See, the thing is that they're going to lift all those quotes and put them on the posters. A whole new level of incredible. Lily Austin, Monocle Radio.
It's funny you should say that, because actually one of the trailers for Megalopolis included a lot of quotes from previous films, from critics, like negative quotes of Francis Ford Coppola's earlier films. There were Apocalypse Now and the like. And obviously to try and give the idea that it seemed at the time his films always get bad reviews, but then in the end everyone loves them. But then it turned out that all the quotes had been made up, and the production company had to apologise, saying we made a mistake.
Outstanding. I am myself a big fan of the out of context poster quote. Like, for example, I could say, well, I didn't see it, and on the posters they could put, see it. Andrew Muller, Monocle Radio.
Yes, well, putting that aside, Francis Ford Coppola, he now will have a street named after him in Rome. Mm-hmm. And my question is whether it will be Ford Coppola or just Coppola. They want to make it more Italian, maybe. But that aside, he's also been honoured with an award by the mayor of Rome. So a lot of fanfare for Francis Ford Coppola, despite the flack he's getting at the moment.
Well, let's look at other accolades. Do we know who are going to be the Lifetime Achievement winners, even if they don't get streets named after them and nice little gong from the mayor?
Yes, this is also interesting. There are two winners this year. One of them is Viggo Mortensen, who you might remember playing Aragorn in Lord of the Rings.
I do not remember that, no. I have not seen Lord of the Rings on the grounds that I am not a friendless 12-year-old.
Okay, well, he is receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award, and he's also premiering his new film, The Dead Don't Hurt, which he stars in, wrote, and also directed.
Okay.
Interesting one. I hope I'm going to be able to catch this one because it's apparently a mid-19th century film that is a sophisticated feminist Western.
Right.
Don't know what that means, but I'm intrigued. And then the other Lifetime Achievement Award is going to Johnny Depp, which is also kind of a surprising choice, but he has a new film that he also has directed called Modi, 3 Days of the Wing of Madness, on the Wing of Madness. This is not about the Indian Prime Minister.
I was just going to say that would be a bold choice of casting.
I know.
See, that ironically, I would watch.
Well, he's not starring in this. He's just directing it. But Al Pacino is in this film because it's actually, it's not about the Indian Prime Minister. He is not. He is playing Amedeo Modigliani.
Okay.
Giuliani.
Okay,
I'm so sorry. I've totally butchered that.
I've just completely lost interest.
But that is an Italian artist. So it does make sense for this film to get its premiere at the Rome Film Festival. Despite Johnny Depp's kind of questionable reputation at the moment.
Other than all of the above, you are going to Rome, as we cunningly foreshadowed. Do you have any plans to see anything in particular?
Yes. The one I'm most looking forward to seeing, here again is me butchering Italian, is Le Cose in Fratumi Luccicano. Okay. Which translates to Shattered Things Shimmer, which is a film made by a collective of 5 women directors. And it kind of looks at feminism in Italy's history, kind of through the framing of this 15th century building where a lot of the women's liberation movement kind of operated out of in Rome. So I think that's meant to be very good, and I'm excited about that one.
Well, we look forward to hearing about that upon your return, but I want to bring you both in now to discuss the appalling prospect of elementary social interactions with our colleagues being made mandatory. In the UK, a former recruitment manager has won a claim for unfair dismissal after she was fired by a new boss who had, on 3 occasions, ignored her workday greeting. The presiding beak ruled that the oafish behaviour of the boss undermined workplace trust, and that, quote, while it might not by itself be a fundamental breach of contract, it was capable of contributing to such a breach. Compensation is to be decided, and I underline compensation. Lily, when I walked in here this afternoon, I specifically recall not getting a good afternoon, Andrew, out of you, so you will be hearing from my lawyers.
Is that true? Oh my gosh.
I don't know. I can't remember. I mean, I don't pay any attention. But in theory, if I have understood the precedent here correctly, I can take you for everything you have.
And to be honest, quite rightly. No?
Okay, good. Well, that's on the record. Excellent. This is going brilliantly, Chris. There's no point in you now suing Lily. She's got nothing.
She's got absolutely nothing. No, that was quite incredible. Especially because I would have thought I'd just reverse it on you and say, like, how many times have you greeted us when you walk in on an afternoon?
Actually, that's not an unreasonable point, Lily. It might be quicker if you just give everything you own to Chris.
Did I just win that argument?
But I think this is definitely a British thing. You know, British people are very, very bad at saying hello. I've had French friends of mine have told me how shocking it is moving to Britain and not getting a greeting in the morning at work.
The French are complaining the British are rude.
Apparently, they always go around shaking everyone's hand.
No wonder they never get anything done.
Yeah, that's very true. That's true. It's still very familiar in France, yes.
Chris, where are you on this? Because this does sound, to be honest, if I did not know for a fact that this had happened here in the UK, this would sound like one of those things that happens where you come from that causes the world to point at Americans and laugh at them.
Well, I guess in the sense that we like to sue everybody for absolutely everything, yes, I suppose that is true. But in terms of the actual greeting bit, I mean, yeah, you should greet your colleagues. Absolutely.
All of them?
I mean, as many as you can. You should at least say hi if you walk past them. I mean, the idea of intentionally ignoring people, like, come on, boss.
I'm not.
You know, I'm not going to do a whole highfalutin thing about how managers need to get leadership lessons. But I mean, you know, there is a certain thing when it comes to being a manager.
What if you're the CEO of a company that employs 20,000 people?
If you pass them in a hallway and they say hello to you, I'm going to say you should say hello back. I think that's a pretty simple one, frankly.
What if, and I'm just putting out what the errant boss put to the tribunal, he was just busy or distracted, and I quote from him, if I didn't say hello, I wasn't being rude, I was just busy.
But can you ignore people just because you're busy? I mean, reading a little bit about this case, it sounds like it was definitely a passive-aggressive.
Oh, absolutely.
Pointed.
I'm not
going to greet her.
I'm busy. This was I don't like you, so I'm not going to say hello.
Oh no!
That's
In the finest British traditions of pass-ag behaviour, but nonetheless, it is not unreasonable. It's not unimaginable that a person could arrive at their place of work and there's 100 different things going on in their head, and they're worried and stressed and tired or thinking about something else, and someone says hi, good morning, and you just sort of think, I mean, well, that can. I mean, obviously, I'm speaking for myself here, but that doesn't sound outrageous, does it?
And in our job, we often have headphones on, so if I didn't greet you today, Andrew, that's probably why.
Well, I'd tell that to the judge.
Good luck with that one.
Chrissy, are you actually making a case in favour of the plaintiff here? I mean,
I feel like I have to take that side just to be the opposing view on this table. Yes, I would take the case of the plaintiff here. Your boss, of all people, should at least be able to say hello to you. It's a very simple thing, or at least once out of 3, I believe, was the charge here. I mean, obviously we weren't there, and we don't know if the boss had headphones on or not. But, it's nice to try and be polite. I do find this whole discussion between British and Americans definitely interesting, though, on this impact, because I have noticed the passive-aggressive style of the British compared to the Americans. And I would say even when I was working in the US, I do remember to exactly this point working in an office where the one person who would never greet anybody was the British colleague who would just sit down at his desk and not say hello when he came into the morning to anybody. He was the only one. So there is definitely something to this cultural difference.
Yeah, I am reminded, Lily, of a British colleague of mine who went to Australia, where I'm from, for the first time, and when he came back, I asked him what he thought of it, and he said it is actually quite a lot like Britain, except the weather's nicer and everyone just says what they actually think. Which he said took some getting used to, but did acknowledge that it does save quite a lot of time and energy.
I mean, the thought of that just makes me feel really nervous and uncomfortable. No, give me your passive-aggressive.
Excellent. We've made Lily nervous and uncomfortable. Our work is done. Lily Austin and Chris Cermak, thank you both for joining us. You are listening to The Daily on Monocle Radio. Earlier today, an unusual train departed Amsterdam Central. It was unusual for a couple of reasons. One was that it also arrived after a 4-hour journey at Amsterdam Central. The other is that this was the first of several services to be offered by the 50 Hertz Club train, a literal mobile disco. And among those aboard was Shanae Bostage, a journalist based in the Netherlands. Shanae, what was it actually like?
It was loud. Yeah, it was very loud. There were 4 carriages. 2 of them were repurposed. I guess they'd been refitted from restaurant cars. They were purposed as club booths. So where you would normally have the cafe was kind of the DJ zone, and everyone else was sort of jumping up and down and boogieing. And the other 2 were chill out zones with some of the seats still in there. And there were a couple of bars, and everyone was getting tanked up at 12:30 in the afternoon.
I have a number of questions. The first of which is the jumping up and down and boogieing, as you put it, accompanied by alcoholic beverages on a train. How smooth are these rails? Because I can see the problem.
Well, I mean, it's the Netherlands. We've got pretty good infrastructure, but I mean, if you were the tiniest bit likely to suffer from nausea, this probably wouldn't be the train for you. In fact, you could actually feel through the metal, the beat, even when you weren't in the club carriage. It was extraordinary.
So, yeah, loud, you said. I mean, how would you categorise the music being played?
The DJ informed me that he was playing Afro beats, the first DJ who was on. It was quite funky, actually. I mean, it started off pretty chilled out as we left the station, and then it got kind of louder and more fiery, and they chucked the journalists off at The Hague. So presumably that was when the real raunchy action really began.
So you didn't get to experience the full thing. You had to come back from The Hague on just like a normal train without Afrobeat.
Yeah, it was a great disappointment.
That is a great disappointment. Would you be able to generalise about who are the people who decide that what they want to spend their afternoon doing is raving on a train?
You know, it was super nice. There were actually all kinds of people. I thought it might just be young, beautiful people, but there was young and old. There was a couple who'd come over from America who were doing a tour of Europe and decided this sounded cool and they liked the DJs, and so they'd come along. There were some young people. There was a couple of 50-year-olds. Amsterdam's night scene is actually quite inclusive. So there were really all sorts of people, and quite a lot of people were just like, yeah, I thought, why not? It's a bit different, and it's quite nice to go clubbing in the daytime, and you probably get your kicks for a bit less cash, really, because it's so unusual.
And of course, it does significantly enliven a Dutch train ride because it's not like there's any scenery. Do you know, how much more of these services they are planning to operate? Is this going to become a regular component of the Dutch railway timetable?
I mean, it could be quite fun, couldn't it? Unfortunately, this is just 8 services. This was on the first one that I went, but there's one tonight from 12 until 4 a.m. So I imagine that'll be even more raucous. And this is part of Amsterdam Dance Event, which is both a clubbing festival, but also quite a big music industry conference and event, because the Dutch are really big on DJing, and it's actually a huge economic industry in the Netherlands.
The key question in closing, it's always the key question, I think, to put to any journalist who has just survived some or other journalistic undertaking, is would you do this yourself on your own time with your own money?
Do you know, I actually would, but I wouldn't take my bag because I felt like a bit of a dork with my bag and my computer on my back. It was fun, actually. And the nice thing about it was also because you had the chill out carriages, you if you felt like a bit of time out, you could take some time out. The only thing that was quite disturbing was the man who was wandering up and down the carriages going, "Would anyone like some candy? I'm the candy man." And then offering those necklaces with little sweets on. That was a bit strange.
Yeah, I've seen actually quite similar things on Dutch trains that weren't specifically designated as rave zones, so that doesn't necessarily surprise me all that much. Shania Bostash, we will let you recover. Thank you for joining us. This is The Daily on Monocle Radio. Art Basel Paris is in full swing in the French capital this weekend and debuting in its new venue, the historic Grand Palais, which has just undergone a 3-year restoration. Monocle's Sophie Monaghan-Coombs is in Paris and found a perch overlooking the vast number of gallery booths to catch up with Vincenzo De Bellis, the director of fairs and exhibition platforms at Art Basel. Here is Vincenzo.
This is a phenomenal building that was built exactly for the purposes of fairs, specifically for the Exposition Universelle. And so to finally bring the quality of art that Art Basel can bring into this building, honestly, is a dream come true.
And we are here on the first public day of the fair. We've had a couple of VIP preview days earlier. What is the sense you've got from how successful in terms of sales this year will be for all of the galleries that are represented here?
I'm very happy to say that the results are very solid and very positive. Actually stronger than our expectations and stronger than any of the exhibitors' expectation. We know there was a lot of anticipation for this show. Probably the single most important moment in the market this year, simply because of their coming back into this building, and it's looking very incredibly positive.
The fair is not just taking place in the Grand Palais. There are lots of things to do and see across Paris and this weekend and beyond. How important is it for you as a brand to kind of really get into the city and really make it a kind of city-wide experience?
It's incredibly important. It's one of the signatures of Art Basel at a global level. And when you have the chance to work in such a great city, which has been at the art of the art world for so many years, for centuries, not to really use that as a platform would be a huge miss. We have the great opportunities to collaborate with some of the most important institutions worldwide, which are based in Paris, and so we take every advantage of that.
Let's talk about Miu Miu quickly, one of your most important partners this year, and they've created this wonderful exhibition space that is open to the public, and it's a really inventive, creative experience. I went along yesterday. Could you talk a little bit maybe about why Miu Miu were the right brand to work with on something like that?
Yeah, first of all, let me express our gratitude to Miu Miu and to Miuccia Prada specifically, but also let me express how happy we are about having pulled this off this year in this collaboration. Miu Miu is a very special brand. You probably know that the Prada family is very invested in art, in contemporary art, with their foundation based in Milano and also now elsewhere, also in Shanghai. And it is a great opportunity for us to collaborate with such a family/brand which is very much interested in supporting emerging and actually cutting-edge art. Specifically, Miu Miu is the brand where the Prada family, in this case specifically Miuccia Prada, really explores goes kind of more into her wildest dreams and really tries to test herself. And it's what art does every day, or what should be doing. And if it doesn't, then it stops to be important. So it is very important that fashion and art, where it's important where they overlap, is when they can really kind of experiment and they go beyond their boundaries. In this case, you were mentioning the Goshka Matsuga show, curated, orchestrated show, which also features many other artists and filmmakers coming from the Miu Miu tales, so the past videos and characters that have been kind of protagonists of Miu Miu's runway shows and other projects, is get together under one umbrella. And it's beautiful because it's an ever-evolving, ever-changing show. It's a performance. It's an ongoing performance. And so when people go into the Palladium now, where this exhibition is hosted, they really see a show that it's never the same.
Vincenzo De Bellis, the Director of Fairs and Exhibition Platforms at Art Basel, there in conversation with Monocle's Sophie Monaghan-Coombs. Art Basel Paris runs until the end of the weekend. This is The Daily on Monocle Radio. And finally, on today's show, Spirit of Paimio is an event held each year at the Alvar Aalto-designed Paimio Sanatorium in Finland. It gathers together leading figures in the worlds of design and architecture to share their views on the famed Finnish modernist architect, as well as to share their own recent works. Our Helsinki correspondent Petri Burtsoff attended the two-day event and met up with its curator Joseph Greimer. He began by asking him about how Spirit of Paimio was born and what it seeks to achieve.
Spirit of Paimio it's an annual event. We hold it every autumn here at the Paimio Sanatorium. And the idea with this conference is to create a platform in which design practitioners, people working in the fields of design, architecture and other related fields, art, urbanism, even fashion, have an opportunity to come together in this amazing, incredible, unique, inspiring place and share what they're working on, but also exchange ideas around the relevance of this place, to allow themselves to be influenced by this place and to share ideas on what we can learn from this building, which is almost 100 years old now, but never ceases to be absolutely relevant in the present. So it's really a get-together of amazing creative people from all over the world who are really looking towards what is the future of design.
We're now in the second edition. Last year you spoke about the building itself and sort of how to preserve it. This year the theme is slightly different, still touching upon Aalto's work very much. The theme is reimagining community. Maybe talk to us a little bit about why you chose this particular theme and how it ties into the work of Alvar Aalto.
Yeah, I mean, the Paimio Sanatorium as a building, as a site, is in a moment of transformation. It's in the process of being rethought in terms of what its function can be within sort of the Finnish landscape, but also within the global landscape. And that's something that is obviously carries huge potential. And it became very clear to us quite quickly that in order for it to find a purpose which is relevant and that is meaningful to the international community, we really need to build a community around this place. A group of, you could call it almost like an informal advisory board, a group of friends, people who love and who are inspired by this place and who really care about its future. And we thought the best way for them to become part of this project is for them to come here and to meet and to spend time in this place and to allow themselves to be inspired by it. And that's really the ethos of this whole project and that's why we chose this theme, reimagining community, because we really believe that the essence of this project is a formula, a deep belief in the value of community. And obviously for many, many years as a hospital, like it or not, it was a community of people. And that obviously, as the building gradually fell into disuse, that was a little bit lost. And we really want to bring it back, maybe in a different form, not as patients anymore, but more as lovers of design, and rekindle that fire in a way.
And you had an amazing and interesting lineup of speakers. And I think what is noteworthy is that the Paimio Sanatorium is a modernist masterpiece, and you'd kind of expect most of the speakers to be architects who come here on a sort of a pilgrimage. But you had architects, but you also had somebody from the European Space Agency. You have people from the field of fashion. You have many sort of different fields present here. Maybe talk to us a little bit about your speaker selection and some of your highlights this year.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the building and you look at the work of Aalto, it was very much defined by an outward-looking understanding of what design is. It didn't limit itself to a structure. It was really the furniture inside, the textiles, the details, the lighting. Everything was really part of the project, and we really wanted to double down on that understanding of design, something that touches every aspect of life. So actually, we kicked off the conference, as you mentioned, with Ercilia Vaudo, an astrophysicist, Chief Diversity Officer at European Space Agency, who actually began by talking about the moon. So something that apparently could not be further away from what we're talking about here, but it was actually really, really interesting to hear from her about the way in which there's this, as we all know, there's a new space era, space age opening up in front of us, and a lot of research is being done into what it means to inhabit a place that is as unfamiliar and as inhospitable as the moon. And of course, community building is very much a part of that. So that was an incredibly inspiring talk. We had also some very big names of the architecture field. Bjarke Ingels gave a fantastic talk on the work he's doing in Bhutan. Dan Hill, director of the School of Design of Melbourne, I think he's been also part of the Monocle history in the past. And Beatrice Colomina, preeminent architecture historian from Princeton University. Yeah, it's very much about creating interdisciplinary dialogue.
That was Petri Burtsoff at Spirit of Paimio, and that is all for this edition of the Monocle Daily. Thanks to our panellists today, Chris Cermak and Lily Austin. The show was produced by Tom Webb and researched by Gunnar Grunlid and Sana Jumani. Our sound engineer was Sarah Nichol. I'm Andrew Muller here in London. The Daily is back at the same time on Monday. Thanks for listening.